Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome back to a new reaction, and this one is by Ahoy, and it is 2000. Now, if you've never heard of Ahoy before, I've been a big fan of his channel for a while. He does a lot of these, like, informational videos, talking about, like, history of video games, and, like, how the things that like are in them were created in real life in their history. Like the first thing I ever discovered from him were his videos talking about like video game weapons and like their histories in real life and how they were created and came up with and stuff like that. And honestly, that's one of his biggest things on his channel. But it's funny because like I discovered him like, and he has videos going back like well, not almost, literally over a decade. But then at some point he stopped uploading, or stopped uploading as frequently as I should say, because he has a lot of videos of like 8 years, and then after that, one video from 7 years ago, 4 videos from 6 years ago, a couple of videos from 5 years ago, one from 4 years ago, 2 from 3 years ago, and then seemingly about 2 years ago, he started uploading more frequently again. Not like, oh, one video a week or a month or anything, but it's enough that I've actually started, noticing it. And one where I've started wanting to do reactions to his content. It's just, it's actually just remembering to, hit the record button when I actually start watching his stuff. So yeah, this video is what I presume to be about the year 2000. And, I mean, thinking about it, I mean, I was 5 at the time. My brother was just born, and that's when we adopted him. Honestly, I can't remember much from back then. I mean, it was just that sort of happy sort of existence of childhood back then. I mean, it's nothing real much I can say on the topic. And honestly, like, video games were not really a big thing in my childhood for the longest time. Like, the first Nintendo console we ever got was the GameCube, and we got Super Mario Sunshine, and then, like, and that was the only game I had on it for, I think, almost half a year before they announced the Wii. So, before that, the only Nintendo thing I had was the Game Boy Advance SP, the one that folded, and I had a whole bunch of games for that. And then before that, I had a few old computer games, like Microsoft Train Simulator. I eventually got, Fallout 3 New Vegas, Civilization 5, which made me get Steam eventually, but that's, some years down the line. I also played StarCraft 2. The funny thing was, about halfway through the campaign, I'm remembering, I actually stopped earning achievements because I discovered the cheat codes for the game, so I started using cheat codes to beat all the missions really quickly and never actually beat them properly. But again, as I'm saying that, I'm really realizing that a lot of my, video game memories that I actually have were from, like, the early 2010s and later. Like, so I didn't, again, video games were much more a slightly older childhood thing. I didn't have, like, oh, we went and rented something from the video store and played it on the NES or something like that, because, again, the first video game thing I ever came across, actually thinking about it, I literally just remember this. Literally, the first video game thing I ever came across was when we went to Lithuania to adopt my little brother. And my cousins, at the time, we were visiting some cousins on my mother's side there on their farm, and they had, oh god, was it an NES or an SNES? I forget, but we played Super Mario Bros. 3 on it. I played Super Mario Bros. 3 on it with her. Oh, I only just remembered that. Oh, that was wonderful. But yeah, so again, like, early 2000 and the early 2000s was very much, I had no idea what was going on in the realm of video games at the time, because I didn't even know what video games were. So I am excited for this, so let's get this thing started. So yeah, of course, as always, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video will lead to my Let's Play of the day. And yeah, if you like this video or any other video that I make, I'd very much appreciate it if you gave the video a like and subscribe to my my channel, because my main goal for this year is to hopefully hit 5,000 subscribers, and I'm well on the way of actually doing that, thankfully. So yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we? Reaction Online.
2000 was an exciting year. It was 1990 no more, and a whole new millennium beckoned with potential. It was a transitional year for gaming too. A generation of consoles was coming to an end, and the battlegrounds were littered with failed machines. The 3DO, the Sega Saturn, the Atari Jaguar. It wasn't a console war.
Atari Jaguar, I've
It
heard
was a
so many
massacre.
horror stories about that.
Nintendo were still standing. Their N64 had found a family-friendly niche, particularly in the American market. A steady stream of Mario
Paper
games
Mario.
helped, and 2000 gave us Paper Mario, Mario Tennis, and Mario Party 3. One of the biggest N64 releases was Zelda Majora's Mask, a follow-up to the hugely successful Ocarina of Time, and while Majora's Mask didn't sell quite as well, it garnered critical acclaim and a cult following. Another N64 classic, Rare released Perfect Dark, a spiritual
Dark,
successor
never
to
heard that one.
GoldenEye. It lacked the Bond license but didn't lack ambition. The game pushed the hardware to its limits. The visuals were very impressive, but the frame rate less so. Compared to other platforms, the N64 had relatively few releases, but the games that were released were generally of a high standard.
Relatively few releases. How many games were actually released on the N64? Wait, 388? Really? Okay, that is a lot less. Well, okay, so let's see, as a comparison, how many games were released for the PlayStation 1? 1,200? Oh, okay. Jeez. Okay, yeah, so I can see... Oh, wait, this is in North America. I mean, and even then, that's just in North America. That's not counting the rest of the world. Okay, I can definitely see the disparity. Wow.
It was the home of the big mascot games, like Banjo-Tooie, Kirby 64. But the biggest franchise at this time was Pokemon.
Pokemon,
In 2000, Pokemon Stadium released in America and Europe, and quickly became the best-selling console game that year. It sold 1 million copies in its first month.
God, I remember
The only
Pokemon,
thing that could
Pokemon
outsell
Stadium
Pokemon
XD.
Stadium was Pokemon Gold and Silver for the Game Boy Color.
Yeah, there you go.
On its first day of release in Japan, it sold 1.4 million copies. In its first few weeks in the US, it sold 2.9 million. 12% of all video games sold this year were Pokemon titles.
12%? Gee, over 1/10. Wow, okay, that is nuts.
This was good for Nintendo, as they were facing strong competition in the console space. Mobile gaming was still in its infancy, and the only realistic
wow.
option for handheld play was the Game Boy. Pokemon was huge, and so Nintendo dominated the handheld market. Nothing else came close to the sales of Gold and Silver, but there were a few other notable releases for the Game Boy Color. Metal Gear Solid was the handheld debut of the Metal Gear series. Wario Land 3 continued the handheld exclusive games featuring Wario. So, while Nintendo were buoyed by their handheld success, the N64 wasn't as secure in the market as they might have hoped. With a new generation looming, Nintendo were no doubt planning how to take on their biggest
The
rival.
GameCube. Wait, how many games were released on the GameCube now that I'm wondering? Really, only 651. Jeez, okay. Actually, wait, Xbox 360. 2,000. Jeez, okay.
5 years into its life, the Sony PlayStation was still doing numbers. It had outsold the N64 by a ratio of 2-1 and was dominant in the European and Japanese markets. Thanks to its popularity in Japan, CD-ROM storage, and support from Square, it was the place for JRPGs.
Jeez, yeah.
Final Fantasy IX, Vagrant Story, and Dragon Quest VII all released this year. In theory, the N64 was the more
Quest VII.
powerful platform, but hamstrung by cartridge size and memory latency, the PlayStation kept pace in the 3D stakes. Third-person action games like Siphon Filter 2 were standard fare. First-person shooters like Medal of Honor Underground tapped into the rising popularity of shooters on consoles. The textures were low-res, the polygon count low, and the controls often clunky. But this was the generation where 3D graphics became the expected norm.
I mean, granted, like now with like indie games, having something that's not, 3D isn't expected anymore. And you can have a good game without it being 2D, with it being like 2D or any other weird art styles. But like, I can't help but feel, nowadays, like, the focus on more and more powerful hardware, more polygons, better lighting, like, it takes away from the fact that, like, you're trying to make something to play that feels fun, that's fun to play, not something that looks real. I mean, if I want real, I'll just go outside. And it's a lot cheaper too. I mean, in some cases. Ooh.
3D opened up the potential for new genres and allowed home consoles to offer arcade-like experiences. The PlayStation had established itself as the home of driving games. It had Gran Turismo, after all. It had variety too, from serious driving simulators like Colin McRae Rally 2.0 to the crime-fueled Driver 2.
Driver 2? Never
If you
heard
were
of
a
that.
sports fan, PlayStation had all of the big yearly franchises: NFL, NHL, FIFA. Skateboarding games were surprisingly popular at this time. The Tony Hawk series was topping the charts, and the release of the sequel elevated skateboarding to new heights. The explosion in extreme sports led to imitators like Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX and set the stage for similar games on the forthcoming generation. While Nintendo had the lion's share of mascot-led games, there were a few family-friendly titles that intruded on Nintendo's turf. The Spyro series had its third entry with Spyro Year of the Dragon, a cutesy 3D platformer. And the popular Crash Bandicoot series had Crash Bash, a party game in the Mario Party mold. In short, the PlayStation had more games suitable for more ages. The games were cheaper, cooler, and more varied than anything else on offer. It also helped that it was easier to find pirated games. Sony were newcomers to the console scene, and in less than one generation had installed themselves as king.
And the whole thing was that the PlayStation at one point could have been was it an add-on or the next successor of a Nintendo console? Like, oh god, can you imagine the world we'd live in? Like, what little differences to basically everything and, like, to pop culture if that was the case. Like, there is no, like, PlayStation or versus Nintendo versus Microsoft, which even nowadays Microsoft is starting to pull out of that race. But, like, it would have just been Nintendo versus Microsoft with the Xbox and nothing else. Jeez.
And if that wasn't enough, they were preparing to unleash a devastating blow to their rivals.
PS2!
Meanwhile, the PC was doing quite well. While the console wars were brutal, computers had long since consolidated to IBM compatibles. The closest rival was Apple, who had been struggling for years and were only starting to make a recovery. As far as computer gaming was concerned, the PC was the only choice, and over the last decade they had become a common purchase for the home. So with an install base in the tens of millions, there was a sizable audience for PC games. The biggest selling PC game of 2000 was The Sims, a life simulator game from the creator of SimCity. It was a unique game that appealed to an unusually wide audience, and it did rather well as a result.
God, I remember... Okay, that's a game I remember having. I remember having The Sims. I never played any of the other games afterwards. But let me see, do I still have it somewhere? Ooh. There we go. The Sims Deluxe Edition. Even still has the disc and everything. Both of them! Oh god, I remember playing this so much back then. And of course, like, I wouldn't play it properly, where it's just, like, oh, build a house, cheat in money, build bigger house, cheat in money, build a bigger house, cheat in money, move family in, get bored in 2 hours, then just repeat the cycle again.
Selling 6.3 million copies by 2002. There were many expansion packs and sequels that followed.
Yeah.
Another hotly anticipated game was action RPG Diablo 2, Blizzard's follow-up to 1997's Diablo. RPGs had long been a staple of PC gaming, and Blizzard had a great reputation at the time with the success of
At
Warcraft
the time,
and Starcraft.
yeah.
So it's perhaps unsurprising that Diablo 2 ended up as the fastest-selling computer game ever. CRPG players were spoiled for choice, really. This year also had Baldur's Gate 2 from BioWare and Icewind Dale from Black Isle. Another classic PC genre was strategy, and one of the highlights of the year was Shogun Total War, a meaty slice of turn-based planning with 3D real-time battles and the opening entry of the Total War series.
Jesus, it really is amazing how many, like, for what became mainstays started out in the early 2000s. It really is shocking. It really is amazing.
The popular Command & Conquer series had a return to form with Red Alert 2. After the divisive Tiberian Sun, the alternate Cold War setting was welcomed, although it wasn't quite as good as the original. 3D stealth action games were en vogue too, likely due to the popularity of Metal Gear Solid. IO Interactive gave us Hitman Codename 47, an open-ended assassinate 'em up.
Assassinate them up. I'd never thought of calling the Hitman series an assassinate 'em up. Like, I love that.
And Looking Glass Studios released Thief 2: The Metal Age. A Hail
Another
Mary
good game
from
from what
a
I've heard.
struggling studio, which, despite critical acclaim and healthy sales, failed to save the company from bankruptcy. One key advantage of PC gaming that the consoles hadn't yet usurped was online play. The internet was rapidly becoming more and more popular, and for most people, the first, if not the only, device to be connected was the PC.
Yep, I remember that.
Games
Well,
like-
even then, like, I remember, I mean, for the longest time, like, even though we had the Wii, like, we never hooked it up, even if we did have, like, Wi-Fi at the time. Like, it was, because, well, I mean, like, for Nintendo and consoles, you had to pay for the online, you had to pay for the online. It wasn't until we got the Xbox 360 that we actually started, paying for, like, the online stuff, and that was very much, oh, pay for, like, the 12 months at a time so you don't have to deal with this later. And, oh my god, oh god, that reminds me. So, there was this one thing, it was just after we'd gotten the Xbox, we had convinced our dad to let us use the credit card on, you know, so we could buy the online play, and we forgot to turn off the auto renew. So he ended. When the bill came in a couple months later, there was a suspicious charge that he had no idea what was going on with it, and he kind of freaked out. And oh god, that was a horrible day. Oh.
Quake 3 Arena, Unreal Tournament, and Team Fortress Classic had installed themselves as online essentials.
Team Fortress
And
Classic.
this was the year that Counter-Strike made its debut. Backed by Valve and the Half-Life name, it found instant popularity. The realm-based tactical FPS remained popular for years afterwards, topping play count rankings.
It still is rather popular
The
today.
PC market was challenging, however. The sheer breadth of software available meant that many games, no matter how critically acclaimed, didn't sell particularly well. Take Deus Ex, for instance, a first-person action RPG that was hailed as the pinnacle of PC gaming, festooned with awards, and retaining a cult following today. It sold about 138,000 copies in the US in its first year. There was a lot of competition for shelf space,
Yes, with the
and the big
PC.
boxes didn't help. The PC market had a lack of cohesion, and the consoles were starting to gain ground.
Yeah, that was one of those things. Like, if I remember correctly, one of the big things with Steam, just in general, was purely at the beginning it was to make updating their games easier, as well as actually finding out what hardware the people who were playing their games used, so they could better develop their games to play on specific hardware. Because, like, it's not like today where you only have, like, 3 different brands of, like, graphics card, for example. Like, you have, like, NVIDIA, AMD, and then Intel, which has come in as well. back then, from everything I've seen, there was a lot more different brands and different companies that made them. Now multiply that by CPUs and like everything else like that you can customize in a PC. Oh man, game development back in the day was hard.
Even PC stalwarts like the point-and-click adventure were struggling. The golden era of LucasArts was over, replaced with an endless string of Star Wars games. Many great PC exclusives of this era failed to gain the traction they deserved. The operative, No One Lives Forever, was a deft blend of camp 60s espionage with first-person stealth action, and it was very good. It received critical acclaim, with some reviewers comparing its innovations to those made in Half-Life.
Really?
It sold 36,000 copies.
Yeah, I've never heard of that game before.
Of course, some flops were more deserving than others. Daikatana came out this year too. It was supposed to be the
I've
next
heard of
big
that
FPS
flop,
from
yeah.
John Romero to exceed Doom and Quake. A promise the game couldn't uphold.
Yeah, also from what I've heard, that's another one of those things that was in development hell for a while and got pushed back a fair number of times.
Iron Storm forecasted sales of 2.5 million, but its poor reviews scuppered any chance of a hit. It sold just over 8,000 PC copies in the US in its first few weeks. History remembers it as one of the biggest commercial failures of the era. There was just no room for mediocrity. The PC had more games available than any other platform, but players didn't have bottomless wallets. 7 out of 10 isn't good enough when the shelves are filled with 8s, 9s, and 10s.
Yeah, and even then, like the same problem is kind of happening today with when you have online marketplaces like Steam. I think I remember reading like somewhere that like on average like 400 games get published to Steam every day. Now, of course, there's a good chance that nowadays some of those are just shovelware slop and they kind of get filtered down to the bottom with nobody buying them. But even then, like so much stuff gets pushed out nowadays. Now, and thankfully, quote unquote, because it is kind of sad, with like so many big publishers just completely flopping, and now, especially with like when you look at like some of them like Ubisoft, where it's on the edge of bankruptcy, still I think, like that. Hopefully that opens up for like a new generation of like bigger games and bigger companies to come up with that actually like know what they're doing. But at the same time, it's always been, the curse of plenty with PC games, where there's just, because of it, where there's just so much stuff.
So the PC needed a new approach to selling games, one more flexible and with fewer overheads than retail. But until
Steam?
that solution arrived, AAA game development would become increasingly centered on the consoles. The worst was yet to come. The next generation of consoles had just arrived, eroding the PC's graphical advantage. The new hardware was ever more capable of handling 3D graphics, and provisions were made to satisfy the rising popularity of online play. The next gen was a threat. First to market was Sega's Dreamcast, launched the previous year. Sega had struggled during the last generation, with a lukewarm reception to the Saturn,
and this one wouldn't help at
an
all.
alarming tower of failed add-ons for the Mega Drive. With Sony taking pole position, Sega couldn't afford any more mistakes. The Dreamcast was developer-friendly, able to port both PC and arcade games easily.
God, fingering the bottom side of the CD, that's even now, like a CD, DVD, whatever, I just always careful, always grabbing it by the edges or the center,
It was powerful, came equipped with a modem, and the price was fair. It felt fresh and new, and had a fantastic array of colourful, interesting games. It had a good start.
And yet it was a flop.
Crazy Taxi was a perfect port of the arcade original. A fast-paced, zany 3D drive-em-up where you have to deliver passengers to their destination as quickly as possible. It was a must-have. It showed off the next generation's capability and tapped into a cultural vibe in a way that few games can. The cel-shaded Jet Set Radio was similarly cool. An urban grind-em-up with jet-powered inline skates and a killer soundtrack.
Another one of those games I've heard
Weirder
a lot
still
of, but
was
haven't
Space
actually
Channel
seen
5,
much of
a
them.
campy rhythm game where you repel an alien attack by matching actions. It's got a cool 60s sci-fi theme, and Michael Jackson even makes a cameo.
Really?
Most baffling of all was Seaman,
Oh,
which
God.
released in North America this year.
God, no, I've heard of that one. I remember AVGN's review of it. Oh, God, so weird.
I'm not sure what drove Sega to make such weird games, but I'm glad they did. There was nothing else quite like it, and the Dreamcast needed a strong array of games to stand a chance. Exclusives were a big deal, and while Sega may not have had Mario, the Dreamcast was the only place you could play Sonic Adventure. It was also home to Shenmue, which released in the West this year. An ambitious action-adventure life simulator game that was the most expensive video game ever developed at the time.
Wait, really?
It was good, certainly unique, but not quite good enough to recoup its costs, despite selling 1.2 million copies. Still, it was only on Dreamcast at the time, so it served as a pretty good incentive to adopt the system. The PlayStation may have had Gran Turismo, but the Dreamcast offered a strong alternative in Metropolis Street Racer, a racing game with an open world and innovative kudos scoring system. In fact, the Dreamcast had most of the PlayStation favourites covered. There was a port of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, and it had its own exclusive version of Resident Evil with Code Veronica.
Oh, I
There
remember
were a
hearing
slew
about that
of
one.
sports games, with all of the major sports covered. Some major franchises were notably absent, but passable alternatives existed. Honestly, the Dreamcast had a really solid library, especially considering how young the console was. But despite...
Again, I've heard so much about the Dreamcast and how good it was, and yet it still failed. Even with the good price point stuff like that, why did it fail?
their best efforts, Sega couldn't instill confidence in the Dreamcast's future. EA weren't interested in developing for the platform, nor Squaresoft. The Dreamcast was
that'll
good,
do it.
great even, but it wasn't a PlayStation. Sony had
Here
built
comes
a
the
very
big-
powerful
the big
brand over
guy.
the last few years. In a time awash with bad decisions and risky purchases, the PlayStation was always a safe bet. And now, it was time for the PlayStation 2. The PS2 launched in March in Japan, October in North America, and the following month in Europe. Anticipation was sky high, with PS2 scarce on shelves and $250 million in revenue taken on the first day alone.
Oh god, how I miss those days. Now, has the Switch 2 actually officially launched yet? No, it hasn't. Okay. Because I remember a little while ago, there was this whole thing going around on Twitter talking about how, make sure you don't go to it or something of that nature. I mean, granted, I'm not going to be buying it because, super expensive $90 games, and that's $90 in American money. I remember hearing tales of, when we got the Wii, my dad waited in line to get it so that he could give it to our grandparents to give for us for Christmas. And he waited in line in the snow and the cold, and so much so that he actually kind of set up a line system so people wouldn't have to wait up. So you had everybody that was in the line so far, and then after a while of waiting in the snow, waiting for the show, waiting for the EB games to start to open up, he decided, hey, why am I waiting in the cold? So we went back to his truck and got pieces of paper, ripped them up, and wrote 1, 2, 3, 4, and basically went to each person line. Okay, you're 1, you're 2, you're 3, you're 4, you're 5, and basically gave everybody their number in line so that they could wait in their warm cars for the store to actually open up properly. Oh, I remember seeing videos of when Halo and stuff released, people walking in the stores and getting the first copy sold and stuff like that. And granted, in that time I was too young to have done anything like that, and as I said, I've always been very disconnected when it came to world popular culture and stuff like that, especially when I was younger. But seeing that, I wish I could have been a part of something like that. Nowadays, it's everything's being forced more and more on like digital online only stores, and you don't get that sense of camaraderie. And you know that don't get that sense of what of excitement and stuff like that anymore. Granted, I mean, like, there is that, the little bit, like, I mean, every couple of days, I check my calendar just looking at the date I wrote on it, saying, oh, Deltarune coming out. But, it's not the same. It's the same reason why, I mean, going off track a little bit, it's the same reason I don't like streaming, like, movies and stuff like that. Because, at the end of the day, like, a whole thing of seeing a new movie was seeing it in the theater, seeing it with a bag of popcorn, a big thing of pop, and actually seeing it with people, and, like, in the theater. I mean, like, I can watch anything at home. Seeing a new release on my couch, just at home, like, it doesn't feel special. Like, it honestly doesn't. Sorry for going off on a little tangent there.
1.4 million were sold in Japan in its first month, and 10.6 million consoles globally in its first year.
Jeez, a lot.
Sega already knew they were in trouble, but the strength of PlayStation sales by the end of the year made it clear that they couldn't continue.
That's a commercial, I'm guessing?
So soon, the PS2 was left standing as the only next-gen console on offer. It was the logical choice. It could play DVDs after all, and cost about the same as a standalone DVD player anyway. Unusually for a new console, it was backwards compatible with the original PlayStation, so you could carry on playing your favourites until something new arrived. The complement of launch games for the PS2 was a mixed bag. Enough to cover most genres, but the best was still on the way. The annual sports games were perhaps the most important for the launch
checklist. The annual sports games, I remember those.
Had the NFL, NHL and FIFA franchises ready to kick off the next generation. More interesting was SSX, a snowboarding title that scratched the same extreme itch as the Tony Hawk series.
Interesting.
It was originally a Dreamcast title, but after EA lost confidence in Sega's console, development shifted to the PS2. Driving games were another important part of the PS2's launch lineup. The next Gran Turismo was a year away, so in the meantime there were a few other next-gen options. Ridge Racer 5 was an arcade racer from Namco, praised for its tight racing and next-gen visuals, but criticised for a lack of anti-aliasing and limited content.
Jeez, I love that. It's like, man, that's extreme driving. At some points, you're even going sideways.
Rockstar Games were gearing up to dominate the new generation and had 2 racing games on offer ready for launch. Midnight Club Street Racing was a city-focused game with illegal races between exotic imports. Smuggler's Run was an off-road expedition with buggies and other rough-and-tumble vehicles.
Okay.
Fighting games were another popular genre. Tekken
seen
Tag
a lot
Tournament
about
was
those.
a spin-off from the popular Tekken series with a new team fighting mechanic. Dead or Alive 2 Hardcore was an updated version of the arcade game for the PS2, regarded as the best of the genre at the start of the generation. The new and exciting first-person shooter genre was starting to make headway on consoles, with the PS2 receiving a port of Unreal Tournament. Not a patch on the PC original, but it's hard to beat local multiplayer action.
That was the thing. I never got into... that was one of those games I never got into. I mean, granted, maybe it was also just my parents never buying me the game, because... but still.
The exclusive Time Splitters was much better received. Its varied gunplay and characters meshed with better suited gameplay to the console. For third-person shooting action, you had Armored Core 2, a mecha game by From Software. Dynasty Warriors 2 was a large-scale strategic hack-and-slash. The PlayStation had a reputation for great RPGs, but the selection on offer at launch for the PS2 was underwhelming.
Yeah, of course.
Best of the bunch was Summoner, a 3D Western action RPG from Volition. From Software were also quite prolific, building on the success of their King's Field series. They had 2 games ready for launch, Evergrace and Eternal Ring, although neither were received particularly well.
Yeah, again, games I've never
Dark Cloud
heard of.
was originally intended to be a launch title, but slipped to later in the year. A Zelda-style JRPG, it was the best of its genre in 2000, although...
It's weird, that enemy almost looked like it was like it was made out of Lego or something. Like it was very like almost looked like a minifigure. It was very stocky.
So this wasn't the highest bar to clear. With retrospect, the launch titles for any console pale in comparison to those released once it finds its stride, and the PS2
that's always
was no
been a
exception.
thing.
But the basic needs were covered, and many great games were in the pipeline. With the massive hype surrounding the launch of the PS2, Sony couldn't fail to make an impression. With a strong launch and practically no competition, Sony had put themselves in the driving seat for the next generation. The PS2 was a capable system with 3D graphics that looked truly next-gen. From the messy, brutal console wars of the previous generation, a clear victor had emerged. Sega had been bested and were planning their exit from the industry. The 3DO and Jaguar, nothing but a distant memory. Nintendo remained and were preparing their next-gen competitor, but they'd been in the shadow of the PlayStation for a while, and with the PS2's head start, they had a mountain to climb. Even the PC was feeling the effects of the PlayStation's influence. Although the last decade had been great for the adoption of the platform for games, the lack of a standard configuration made it difficult to target. There is something to be said for the simplicity of a console, and the monolithic hardware was starting to become more appealing for both consumers and developers. Microsoft knew this, and with their financial might, they saw an opportunity to challenge Sony's dominance in the console market. Essentially, a PC in a little black box, leveraging the rapid advancement of PC components into a standard configuration. As the PS2 launched in Japan, Microsoft announced the Xbox.
Jesus, that's what the first X, it was literally X-shaped. Oh wow, okay.
Wouldn't release until next year, but Sony's monopoly was going to be tested, and Nintendo were no longer guaranteed second place. It was an exciting time. Technology was cool, and there was nothing but blue skies on the horizon. The arrival of a new millennium had brought a feeling of optimism for the future. We could cast off the clumsy artifacts of the 20th century and embrace a new digital world. Mobile phones and the internet were starting to make a tangible impact on everyday life. We had SMS, we had MSN Messenger. The internet was young and bristled with opportunity. This was the future, and we were living it.
Oh god, where did those days go?
Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, farewell.
Oh god. Yeah, I guess that's just always the way it goes. I mean, but as he said, I mean, like, you were living the future now. And like with the internet and god, honestly, it compared to what we had, I mean, granted, I know the capabilities of the modern internet are far greater, but at the same time, everything we've lost along the way, all of the culture, like the consoles and the console versus PC war. I mean, granted, I know that was a stupid conflict, if you want to even call it that, but it was something. Oh god, I mean, again, like, looking back, and as I said, at 2000, I was literally 5 years old. I wouldn't actually start making tangible memories about this, about like gaming culture and stuff like that, at least for another couple of years. But it honestly does make me feel a little sad, because like, I guess partially because, like, especially like in early YouTube, I watched a lot of the, the angry critics. The ones where they talk about old movies, old video games, old consoles and stuff like that. And I very much kind of fell in love with that era, so to speak. And granted, I love my childhood. I love all the things I experienced and stuff like that. But and again, it's, nostalgia and stuff like that. But like, I can't help but feel like sad about all the stuff that we've lost along the way. Even the stuff that I wasn't even really there to experience. Oh, wow. Oh, God. So, yeah, that's definitely going to be it for now. So, yeah, of course, as always, original videos linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video lead to my Let's Play of the Day. And, yeah, with all that out of the way, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.